Hello and a very warm welcome to WazirX and CNBC TV 18 present a webinar where we are going to discuss about the cryptocurrencies, and the title clearly is about deconstructing the tax implications on cryptocurrencies. Joining me on this conversation is Aritra Sarkel. He is Director Public Policy and Government Affairs from WazirX. We are also joined by Abhinav Sumani. He is Forensic and Crypto Tax Consultant, Investor and Associates LLP. Gentlemen, hi, thank you so much for joining us. And as we all understand that the numbers have been nothing short of phenomenal when you look at the traders and investors who are now onboarding the whole cryptocurrency trade right now. But yes, there are still concerns about the regulatory part of this, because we still are actually waiting the definition of what cryptocurrencies would fall under as an asset class. And clearly the tax implications is something that we basically are learning as we evolve into this space. So first of all, to you, Aritra, how have you seen the kind of participation to begin with and the whole conversation, the dialogue around taxes evolving?
Happen. Thank you so much for the fact. I say thank you to everybody who's talking around crypto nowadays in the market. This is a huge change from what was happening in, say, 2015, 2016, 2018. We all know where I'm going with that. But here's the thing. From the ban till now, it's been a massive change. Even with the pandemic coming in, what has happened? We thought things would go otherwise. The total number of investors in the market for crypto has increased. So has obviously for the fiat market. The total number of women investing in crypto has increased. That really surprised me in a nice way. My mom started investing in cryptocurrencies 3 months back. She just called me and said, "What is crypto, Aritra? What is Bitcoin? Why should I be even bothered about that?" The fact that my mom's 50 and she started asking me these questions. My 16-year-old cousin is asking me, when I turn 18, can I start investing in that? So from a psychological point of view, people have understood the importance, and people have understood, like, hey, wait, there is one more person in the room. Bitcoin, crypto, what is this? Is this some kind of a gaming construct, or what is this? Are we interested? So that conversation has changed. And you all know, you guys are in the media, you all know how important is that. Secondly, another very, very critical thing which has happened, which again, because I was building something very different before WazirX, is the fact that and this is some of our data, and I'm very happy to openly talk about this. The most number of investors, the most amount of capital which has gone into cryptocurrencies in India has not come from cities like Bombay, Bangalore, or Delhi. It has come from small towns in India, tier 2, tier 3 towns in India. Towns like Tenkasi in Tamil Nadu, places like Ranchi, places like Jalandhar, places 100 kilometers away from Gwalior. And there are men, women whose average take-home income is not more than 25,000 rupees. This is a family of, say, husband, wife, and a single child. They have started investing in cryptocurrencies. What that means, and I really want to put this out because this was a learning for me. Understand this, I was a complete naysayer. I was completely against crypto many years back. But once I started reading the white papers and I started coding, I was a journalist in Economic Times way back. Then I realized, wait, it impacts your and my life too. This is just not about a get-rich scheme, or this is just not about tax implications. And this is what I would end this with. You guys understand inflation rates, right? The rate at which it increases. Now, because of pandemic, the prices of a lot of things have come down. But there are a lot of other things, traditional investment areas and even houses, the prices of those have not come down. It has gone up gradually over the years. What crypto has done, and this I've seen with my own eyes, I live in Bangalore, but today I'm sitting out of a town called Jamshedpur, which is my hometown. Small enough town, not good internet speeds, not good bandwidth, but it has leveled the playing field, and I'm not dramatizing this. This has leveled the playing field. Second, it has reduced the barrier of entry when it comes to investing from lower middle class people with lower income. And I'm not making this up. This has happened. And there are returns which are happening, right? I mean, we don't have to go in there. There are massive returns which are happening. I know it's volatile, but that is a big change. It is not only a hedge against inflation, but it has also leveled the playing field when it comes for lower income, middle income class in India in terms of investments. This is the first time they're entering all these fields. That's what I've seen practically happening. So it's a net. Like, I know I'm speaking this on behalf of WazirX, so it looks like, oh, he's saying this because this is he's already from a private company. But net, guys, apart from people like us, the voter class of India is onto crypto. And that's a huge change I have seen in India in the last 1.5 years, from the RBI ban till here.
No, I totally get that, Aritra, because as you said, from your mom to your 16-year-old cousin to, people like you meet on, streets and people in my office, for that example, everybody is talking cryptocurrencies. They want to understand it. And majorly, it's the technology that excites them and also the kind of returns that they're getting. I mean, as you said, it's volatile, but you can buy as small a fraction with as small as investment. And that really is what is exciting a lot of people around here.
I'll add one more thing to that. I'm so sorry. I'm butting it. Don't kill me for doing this. But here's the thing. I'll give you an example. When my family started, we come from a very lower income background. There are a lot of things my parents could not invest in, could not buy because the banks wouldn't give you loan. The banks would look at your bank account like, "Boss, you can't pay back loans. What are you thinking about taking a loan or buying a house of this thing? I wouldn't even give you a commercial property loan. Go." I faced that. I come from a small town. I faced those reactions from bankers. I'm not obviously going against anybody, but the thing that today, I mean, luckily the family is doing really good. I'm doing very well. The fact that today I can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, boss. I can just put 5,000 rupees in that in coins like Shiba and Doge, and still that makes me 10, 15 lakhs because of the market returns. What's wrong in that? Obviously, there are tax implications. Obviously, there are other national security implications. We have to work together, but this is great. People are creating wealth, and I'm not talking about getting rich. This is generational wealth being created, and that's okay for a country like India.
We just put in a question of what you spoke.
Yeah.
So yes, exchanges need to come together, and that is a question I'll put to Aritra as well on how that is being handled. But when a transfer happens from a wallet to wallet, I mean, exchanges are not part of that. How is Indian government going to follow that?
It's not possible to track it unless actually there are income tax audits that happen. Because if I transfer coins from one wallet to the other which is not associated with an exchange, then the exchange doesn't know what I did with my coins. Only I know what I did. But you have to think about it. If I have coins on an exchange, I have purchased it from somewhere. And the only way to purchase coins in India is you link your bank account, complete KYC, transfer money on the exchange, and then buy the coins. So if you feel that, okay, this trader has done a lot, he has withdrawn so many coins, where are those coins? If he has invested more than 5-10 lakh rupees with, for example, WazirX, where's the money gone? In that case, WazirX could probably send statements to, the Indian government and say, okay, this is the trading statement, like Coinbase does that. So all trade transactions by US citizens are sent to the US government just to track it. So these are things that Indian government can do to intervene. But again, cryptocurrency is about freedom. It goes against all investors, and the main idea behind the creation of this.
So one thing that we've established clarity on is that whether you are an investor or a trader, or you are you got coins via airdrop, or you're mining, or there's a transfer, you have to pay taxes. There's no getting away from that. After establishing that, Aritra, coming to you from what Abhinav just said, how is WazirX as an exchange handling reporting to the government or regulation?
I like how you very nicely put that you can't escape taxes. I like that tone which you put that. So here's the thing. Good that you asked that. Something happened today morning. Today is a very special day for the company, for me, because today is the first time in the history of Indian cryptocurrency companies. In terms of that, we have become the first company to put out India's first cryptocurrency exchange transparency report. It just went live today morning. We've shared it with everybody in the media, with the government, each stakeholder in the government. This is just the start of it. All of these things were happening in the background. So I'll break it down to you very quickly. The transparency report, which is out today to the market, to the government stakeholders, it states three things in terms of how many requests do we get from the government. It states that we have worked with authorities here outside of India, in places like Singapore. There are a lot of companies, third-party companies that we work with, who does all kinds of forensic reporting for us. And these kind of information we share on need-to-know basis with the government of India, with the state governments, with the law enforcement agencies. So all that we have done in the last 1 year in terms of protecting investors, in terms of weeding out the bad actors, in terms of did anything wrong happen in the exchange? If it happened, this is the report. All of it has gone into the transparency report. So far, what has happened is we were sharing it with the government. We were sharing on the need to know basis with the law enforcement authorities. But, the last 2 months, we decided, hey, why are we doing it just with them? We have what, 8 million plus, we have 8 million plus investors, right? Let's push it out to them. So today we decided all this information, we'll put it out, public information. XYZ are the government agencies we have worked with. XYZ are the number of requests that has come. And correct me if I can't, I don't want to quote the numbers, it's there in the report, but so far in the last 1 year, we have complied with 100% of all the law enforcement requests which has come into place. And the other thing that we do is, as a chief rightly pointed out, what we do is we also actively work with the cops in every state. We tell them, boss, this is how the blockchain works. And even if the money is out of the ecosystem, when I say ecosystem is equal to the exchange over here. When the money goes out of the ecosystem, you and me take the money out of the ecosystem, then we want to put it on another wallet called Y. So this second stage of transfer that happens, mind you, is publicly available. It's a public ledger. It's very, very critical to understand. It's a public ledger. What it means is all of this information is public. So now I know the entire route. Oh, Aritra has put money over here. He took out money out of WazirX. Then it has gone to somewhere. Then it has gone to somewhere. Now, please mind what I'm saying. Since I have an account in WazirX, Aritra as a user has an account in WazirX. What is happening over here? My KYC of the government of India is getting attached over here. So now this entire blockchain route is publicly available. Like YouTube investigators can pull it out. Forget about exchanging information with the government. Anybody can pull that out. So where is the question of bad actors? If you do something bad, this is the easiest way for you to get caught. Blockchain is, the whole idea was, it's a public ledger, information is freely available. So that's what we are doing. And on a regular basis, as I told you on the transparency report, we work with the Indian government, we work with Indian government authorities, every department of the Indian government. We just tell them openly, boss, this is what you need, this is what we have done, so that the relationship starts. Because what we realized was that, and it is very critical, I want to end that with one line, like, it's not right just to say that, oh, just because we have created a cryptocurrency company, just because some of our competition is also doing great with cryptocurrency exchanges and companies, you should make this legalized. No, man, it's a democracy. You need to tell them, make them sit, put them in the same room, and this is what blockchain does. And mind you, there are very few people over there. Before I went and talked to them, said, what is a public ledger? What are you even talking? Do you know how RBI functions? And when we told them, everything slowly and gradually started changing. So that's what we are doing on our part.
So, just taking that from what you said and giving it to Abhinav then. So that's exactly my question. This is something that people still do not understand. Do the regulators understand this well? And even as we all have spoken about on how this is a public distributed ledger, it is available, it is transparent, everybody can see it. Are the authorities, equipped to understand and put those numbers right there? I mean, we've spoken about on who, when, how much, all of that. But are the regulators ready with that kind of a framework?
I mean, it depends on which exchange you trade on. Now, for example, if this gentleman said that, you trade on WazirX, yes, you do have KYC with WazirX, but, cryptocurrency is such a thing that if you have a resident ID of another country, you can just shuffle residency status. For example, if I have a residency ID of Dubai, I can just tell my exchange, okay, I'm a Dubai citizen, but I'm actually in India. And I can still have a wallet, I can still trade in India, and the Indian government might not even be able to find out whether I'm actually, trading or not. Yes, I do need to link my bank account to purchase those currencies. But, at the end of the day, if I'm a resident, I do have a bank account overseas, I can transfer money and potentially, try to play, go around the system. All these things are very advanced. The government needs to really work closely with the exchanges to start with. That's the only way this can be tracked down. Illicit activities, as it was mentioned, that it's the worst way to do something illegal, because you can track everything on the blockchain. A blockchain is basically a chain of blocks that creates all the data. Every time I make a transaction, all the information is present on that block. So if I transfer 5 coins, it is written over there that this address has sent 5 coins to that address. But it's an address. It's not my name, and my name's nowhere. So if it's, and the address is quite long, I believe it's about 20 characters, odd characters involved in an address. So it's okay, Mr. X is sending 5 coins to Mr. Y, but who is X? Nobody knows that. And also a blockchain, you cannot delete the information. Once it's added there, no one can erase it. So it is something that, I also heard in the news that, there was some money asked from some people in form of Bitcoin, and there's extortion going on and things like that. Now, for example, if I hold 1,000 Bitcoins, if someone tries to tell me that, okay, you have to give me 50 Bitcoins or else I'll probably get you in trouble, I will send it to some random address which cannot be tracked, because that is an address. For example, if that address is created on a platform like MetaMask. So, I mean, there's a lot of in-depth discussions that will need, and the entire tech industry should come together, because even MetaMask, I can open an account probably without KYC. I can do that. So these things need to be closely monitored, and also MetaMask allows you to trade. Now that's a good question here. Now, as you know, if we don't need an exchange anymore, but or the only question here is you need to add funds. Once you find a way to add funds on MetaMask, you're good to go, or even DeFi. So I can transfer coins on MetaMask. That's an exchange, or a platform. You transfer coins from there to a DeFi platform, and you're good to go. You're making money, and tax authorities might not be able to track you down unless there's a tax audit. They find a trail in your conversations. They track your phone. You're under subpoena and things like that. But there's a lot that needs to be invested by us as tax authorities, firstly accountants, exchanges, everyone. All these people have to come together to find a solution to make it more transparent. As it was mentioned that there's nothing against the government banned it, fine, it's okay. You think it's for illegal activities, but now they are also understanding. I believe also the government is using the blockchain to maintain certificates for certain educational Mumbai universities, I believe, using some blockchain. I guess it's Ethereum. So they're understanding the importance of it, and this shows that the data cannot be erased. So these things also create an automatic system which is it has a security inbuilt. You don't need a team behind it now that cannot change the data, that cannot edit information, things like that.
Well, yes, technology is absolutely something that the government, the regulator, the companies are absolutely excited about. It is a tax part of this, and the earnings that you're making is what we're talking about right now. So this one is yet again to you, Abhinav. When we look at it, the applicable tax slabs, whether it's a business income, whether it is going to be treated like a foreign asset, because again, cryptocurrencies are a global phenomena here. And then is there a minimum maximum tax liability to this? I mean, have you done any maths, especially in India?
So there's no maximum cap on it. Like if you make money, the minute you make money, you have to pay tax to the government. That's their commission on your money that you made. It's as simple as that. It's not essentially a currency of one country, or it's an international asset. It's a global thing, and it's it's a part of India too. Even India owns coins. Like there's so many companies that have come out of India. Like there's Matic, there's Solana, there's all these guys, brilliant companies that have grown from India. So I don't think it's the best way to treat it as international assets. The best way, according to me, would be just put it as stocks, short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains, to make it simple. If the government tries to put it, or wishes to do it, treat it as a movable asset, then it might create, because then it becomes short-term capital gain to 3 years. So that's a different discussion that could happen within here. So there's no cap to answer your question. Capital gains are generated, you have to pay money to the government. Mining revenue is a good question that might come up, because now in India there's a lot of mining companies that are also incorporating. So the way they file taxes, and so when you mine a coin, you incur ordinary income, as I mentioned before, but it's like a business. You have mining rigs, you invested money into it, you buy an asset. That asset costs $5,000. Now you have incurred expenses also to mine the coin. You have to keep the room cool. So because the mining rigs have certain algorithms that heat up the system. So to make sure that they remain cool, you have to put air cons in the room, and you have to maintain it to avoid there's some damage to the mining rig. So these expenses, like you store it, warehouse facility. So these expenses should be written off against the mining income, so that a person who wants to get into the mining business understands that, okay, it's a regular business. I'm buying an asset. I can expense out certain things, and then there will be my net profit.
Aritra, when we look at mining part of it, are the exchanges also looking at those numbers? I mean, I understand there are some hundreds and thousands of people who are doing it, and it is now very, very geographically positioned, especially in southern India. Are there any numbers that you guys are working with on that one?
So in terms of mining, no, we are a straight out cryptocurrency exchange, just like other cryptocurrency exchanges. We don't have as such any cryptocurrency mining operations, but there's a big but. In the last 1 year, especially I think August onwards, when China banned all the mining activities, what has happened is, you need to understand, mining requires electricity. Mining requires, as he was saying, look at the infrastructure. You require a lot of you require daily massive amount of electricity. Also, you require a massive net setup where you have a lot of the cooling systems has to be in place for that. So all of this is cost. All of this is electricity cost. And the question is now, where does this electricity come from? Right now, the grids that we have, the electricity which is powering my laptop, your studio, his camera, my phone, everything comes from the normal coal generated thing, right? right? I'm sitting out of Jamshedpur in Jharkhand. All of this electricity coming from coal generated thing, right? Now, where does electricity comes from is a very important question. India, as far as I know, I'll be very honest here. India does not have a very big mining network. We do not have a massive network of cryptocurrency miners for a lot of reasons. Because of the prices of electricity per unit cost, and also how much electricity is required over here. Because there's an economic point to it. You rather trade and make money. But most of the miners in the world were in China, the northern part of China. And after the Chinese government decided to ban them, what has happened is all the mining moved. Please understand this. All the mining is moved to smaller Central Asian countries and parts of Northern America, where, and I can't name people, but most of the mining is now happening through electricity sources, and the electricity is coming out from volcanoes. They're trying to create electricity out of the gases that come out of the volcanoes. This is mining is happening in Iceland. Mining is happening in North America, and also hydroelectric energy. That's where China was so good at in the northern part of China. In India, you do not have a massive amount of infrastructure from which electricity is created like that. That's why the push towards, if you really need to have more cryptocurrency miners in the industry, that will also make you push towards cleaner energy resources, like say nuclear energy resources, the hydroelectric energy resources. But when it comes to India, we are a pure play exchange. We have an NFT platform which is doing fantastically well. We are a pure play centralized cryptocurrency exchange. We do not have anything to do with mining, but as a country, especially in India, I know back in 2015, 2016, I know for a fact because I visited those places, the lot of mining which was happening in parts of Dehradun. There was a lot of cryptocurrency mining which was happening in parts of Himachal Pradesh. Now, reason is very simple, because of the temperatures over there. But eventually they all moved out, because you have to see the economics of how to run a mining rig. Mining rig is, you can do a mining rig like this, you and me with a single laptop. That is also mining, by the way. But that is not economically viable. Mining rig is huge, an entire room of where, say, an entire food storage facility, where massive GPUs are set place. That is huge electricity cost, right? And if you do the unit economics, it's better to mine in Canada. Canada has a lot of miners. North America has a lot of miners, the northern part of America. Then Iceland has a lot of miners. Kyrgyzstan and parts of Central Asian countries have a lot of miners. But India, not so much. It's not an industry as such in India right now.
Also, Richard, since you told us that, if I start an account with WazirX and I do my KYC, who all is that information being shared with? You said there's a white paper out already, but since we have live you with us, would you mind sharing that?
Absolutely. So say you create an account right now. First step, you put in your details, which is your name, number, and everything. Then, put in the details, but then you have to prove the details with a KYC information, right? Which is an Aadhaar card or your PAN card. So it's directly connected with the database of the government. So if we check with the database of the government saying that whether this Aadhaar card or the PAN card exists, whether this number exists or not. So that's a parallel check on the but that the parallel backend check which happens. After that, each transaction is monitored. Each transaction is monitored in the sense if there are if there is a weird activity happening, like for example, you create an account today, right? And suddenly, when I say weird is equal to suddenly you do a massive amount of transaction, and then suddenly the account gets suddenly you don't do any transaction for the next 30 days. Absolutely an individual's prerogative, but that's not regular, right? This is more of a regular trading happening. So when these unique use cases happen, user to user, the use cases are pointed out and the background checks happen on the person. Now, if your details do not match based on what information like the ID card you have provided, then you're not allowed to go ahead and trade. So that's the backend you're happening. Now, say the trading has started from your side. Okay, you have done a month's trading, whatever volumes of trading you have done. But a request comes from the government of India. A request comes from another agency, say a law enforcement agency. And it comes to us, hello, X has done this on your platform. We have got the information. We said, okay, great. Thank you for reaching out to us. We do our due diligence and we check and we share the information if X has actually done such a thing. It's as open as that, and we leave it out.
So, just on an average, how many times have you really entertained these kind of questions from the regulators?
As many times they come to us. Because we realized one thing.
And is that very often?
Sorry?
And is that very often? Do you see, is the frequency higher?
Not that much. It depends. Like sometimes it depends. How do I put it? Let me put this properly. Sometimes it's a couple of times a week, but sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's even once or twice in a month. Like we had around 377 requests. That's the number I remember clearly. But those 377 requests were phased out. Like sometimes 10% of that came, like sometimes a lot of came together. So it depends on who's doing, how many people are doing things wrong and stuff like that. But we do request, and you know what we realize? We realize, boss, what is it there to hide, man? Open ledger, open information. We want this industry to be built so that make in India crypto companies come out of India. So you talk to us, we'll help you weed out the backers, and that's it.
Sure. So, this is a question to you, Abhinav, then, because if there is a KYC that is available and if all the data is available to the regulators, it is imperative that you pay your taxes and you put your data numbers out. But Abhinav, how would you look at various countries on this? Because when you look at the technology, this is not country specific. That is the number one reason for the technology. How are you looking at various countries evolving on this front?
According to me, all countries essentially will have to create a standard law. Now, for example, if there are countries that say, okay, we do not consider it as a taxable event, like Dubai, and there are countries that tax it at 30%, 40%, there are countries that tax it at 30%. Fine, you do create your own tax percentage laws, but there has to be a consistent, a consistent route that everyone can track transactions through. Like, for example, as I priorly mentioned, that if I'm a citizen of a country that's not taxable and I have my KYC done there, but I'm trading from somewhere else, how is the government going to know that, actually this guy is trading from India and he has to pay taxes here? Because everything's happening on the blockchain, everything's happening on, exchanges. So this is something that, it's all up to all governments to come together and find a solution. But I also think, there's a question for all exchanges, because when we do P2P transactions, so I was doing a few P2P transactions the other day. Now, and how that works is, you find a person who's ready to buy or sell those coins to you, and you're ready to buy it at a certain price. It's like a bidding auction. So if a USDT is a dollar pegged coin, for example, I needed 1,000 USDT. And the person on the other side is saying, okay, I'm willing to sell it at 79.5. And I say, okay, so what I have to do is I have to go ahead and Google Pay him the money. And that Google Pay would not have a note to it. And the exchange organizes this transaction and sends me the USDT. So according to me, everything lies in the exchange hands. So what they have to report is their responsibility, yes. Now, if there's an exchange that is from overseas, like OKX, it kind of might be tricky. There are certain exchanges like Binance. Like even Binance, you can hotspot yourself and, say that, okay, I'm not in this country, I'm in that country. You can do many things like that. CoinList is another option. I have a few clients do trade with, I believe that was Kraken or another exchange, which was banned in the US, or Poloniex. So there's many things that need to be taken care of in terms of, and everything can only be done by government agencies here by coming together with exchanges. And obviously tax agencies or maybe, accountants. Back in 2019, I remember the US government rolled out a notice, and they were accepting help from any accountant or an accounting agency that can help them fix the cryptocurrency system. And I've always believed that, if you need to dig down, look at the transfers. That's all. Because everything else is happening on the exchange. If the exchange wants to tell the government, okay, he has traded this much, fine, it can be easily sorted out. But when you're transferring coins, that is something that only the trader knows about. So that needs an audit.
So, decentralized exchanges and how do you go about with taxes and regulations onto that one is something that I'm absolutely going to leave for the next webinar, because let's deal with the centralized exchanges right now. But I want to start getting in your final comments as well. So while, yes, we still are waiting for taxability of cryptocurrencies in the Indian markets, an official announcement is something that we are hoping for would come in during these winters itself. There could be more guidelines, and that is when we will have more clarity here. But until then, and this one is to you, Aritra, what would your advice be to the investors, traders, people who are, creating exposures in cryptocurrencies?
Lovely that you asked that. This is a pivotal moment because it's the first time we are seeing the kind of percentage movements. The last time we saw something like that only happened, by the way, when internet came up. So the social part of the internet came up with Web 2.0. And my advice is this. Here's the thing. This is a great time to build cryptocurrency and blockchain companies in India. It's an open source tech. I know 14-year-olds who have built companies sitting out of Kerala. This is a great time to get into cryptocurrency investments. But as with any investments, don't put your life's income in that, man. I mean, Don't put that. That's a stupid thing to do. Put a little percentage of that income into that. See it grow. Investing in cryptocurrencies, mind you, is step one of getting into the cryptocurrency and the blockchain ecosystem. And then it's a wild, wild world out there. You can go create your own company in every field possible. You can create DeFi companies. You can participate in exchange activities that is happening. The point is, this is a pivotal moment for India. And these cryptocurrency exchanges and companies have been built out of India. This is the start of Web 3.0. Please remember, the last part of the internet, all the big companies that you and me spent our time on or put our money on, they were all out of India. They were all created out of India. And I have no shame in saying that this is our internet moment. The next stage of the internet, mind you, the peer-to-peer thing that he was talking about, the pro-privacy internet that we're talking about is being built out of India right here in our offices in Bombay, Bangalore, and small towns in India. This is India's internet moment. So go out there, invest, put a little bit of your life's worth in that and see it flourish, and don't step back. Things might happen. And also the other thing I want to point out is it's not right to say that we should have one law for everything. It's not the ideal way. You can't have a single law for all of these things. NFT did not exist 3 to 4 years ago. It came because there was a change which happened in the ecosystem of Ethereum, right? DeFi was the natural outcome of blockchain, but DeFis are becoming mainstream now, way after 8 years after blockchain came out. Technically, Bitcoin should have come out of the Bitcoin blockchain, but it did not, right? So there is not one department of the government, there is not one part of the law which has to be engaged for this. There are various departments, the various parts of the law need to be, we need to sit with the lawmakers. Slowly and gradually it will happen. Step one is the bill. Step two is slowly getting everything into ecosystem, the NFT, the DeFi part. But it's a great moment. Doesn't matter what age you are in, start investing, start building crypto. This is India's crypto moment.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that Abhinav will say, do pay your taxes. Abhinav, your advice to investors out there.
Well, there's two things that I would say. First, find an accountant who can actually prepare the tax for you. That is like me. Secondly is, you have to pay your taxes, be transparent with the government. You as it was rightly mentioned, NFT is differently taxed and DeFi is differently taxed. For NFT, there's royalty income, there's sale of NFT, there's capital gains. And for DeFi, there might be multiple sources of income. So all this information needs to be actually referred to with a professional, and don't think that you can do everything by yourself. So there's no harm in seeking professional advice when you have to report to the government, just to maintain transparency. Because as it was mentioned priorly, that this is the worst method to perform any illicit activities. Everything is transparent. So that's all I would like to close my statement on.
All right. Thank you, guys. And that has been such an interesting conversation. I do hope we get together sometime yet again and talk about this because there's just so much to talk about: taxes, investment, and as has been rightly said, this is a day evolving technology field. You have to just keep abreast with so much that is happening into this space. But thank you both of you for taking time out, and thank you to our participants as well for joining in and listening to that very, very exciting conversations. Take care.